I'm Kristen Dalton Wolf. Welcome to Made to Be Conversations. We are in the heart of downtown Los Angeles where things are gritty and so are our conversations. Today I'm sitting down with my dear friend Chelsea Barton where we're going to discuss how a health and nutrition major and someone who mentors people in body image is unaware that she herself is dealing with bulimia. When food is a means of feeling in control, is it ever possible to be free of the control it has on you? We're going to talk about that today.
Welcome to the Kristen Dalton Wolf Show, Made to Be series. Join me and some of my closest friends and mentors as we share deeply personal stories and wisdom that's going to help you get through tough times and experience the fullness of who God made you to be. Welcome to the becoming of who you were made to be.
Chelsea, I'm so happy you're here. You're a dear friend of mine. We've been at women's group together, and I'm already getting emotional. I haven't been emotional in anyone's interview. Oh my gosh, I need to stop. Okay, so one of the things about you is, first of all, you're gorgeous, and I'm just looking at you like, stop looking at me like that. But one of the things about you is you carry yourself so well and with such elegance and assuredness and confidence that you're the kind of person that no one would guess, not even I, knowing you well, would guess some of the things you've been through.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to? The fact that no one would know, but you've got stuff you're even still working through.
To be honest, I feel like it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. I think part of what has contributed to some of it is an overemphasis on what is projected. And I think that that's actually something that I've been working to overcome and be, like you were saying, like be more able to just be like, this is also what I'm struggling with, and be open about that and not have to be presenting a certain kind of image. But also, there's been a lot of redemption that God has done through a lot of the stories. So I also feel like that starts to strip away the layers of our past. Our past is always going to be part of us and part of God's story, the way He works in us and through us. But it also doesn't have to have this like dark, rainy cloud over us either, right? Like He's redeemed those stories already. And so it doesn't need to be
something that weakens you. It's almost like you're standing on those struggles,
right? And it's contributing. I feel like to the light that shines through us, not the darkness that comes through us.
Wow, that's so cool. I love that. I love that just the idea that those things that you have walked through and overcome, and the things that you are still walking through, can actually give you confidence. Yeah. So you wrote it on an Instagram post recently, which is the day that I reached out to you asking if you would have this conversation with me. I was like, thank you for writing that. You're like, I am committing to being more vulnerable. So then I'm like, hey, will you come talk about this?
Yep.
Will you come talk about something you never talked about publicly, which is the fact that you had an eating disorder?
Yeah.
It was in college, right? That's when it started?
It started late teens.
Late teens?
Yeah, late teens. So I had the eating disorder all through college and then a little bit after as well.
Okay. And when you say eating disorder, how would you describe it?
Now I would describe it as bulimia.
Okay.
So I was bulimic for 6 years. I would not have considered myself bulimic until maybe the last couple of weeks of those 6 years was the first time I was like, oh, we actually have a problem. There's actually, like, this is real. I think I might have shared this with you before, but my degree is in nutrition. And so we obviously studied eating disorders. And so I would be extra interested in the part where I'm learning about, what I'm already struggling with. But I would learn the parameters of what defined bulimia. And then like clinically, because it's not just like you've ever purged, right? There's certain like parameters. And I would do anything I could to stay outside of that.
What are the parameters? Like, what defines?
So it would be things like, for instance, the easiest one for me to stay outside of was, and I find this interesting, but it has to do with you at least are purging. I think I don't know if it's changed, but I think at the time it was like once per week, which I'm like, if you're purging at all, something's going on, right?
Yeah.
But so say I purged 3 times in a day and a half. Well, okay, I need to not purge for 3 weeks, so that my average is less than that. So that I could self-justify that I'm not bulimic, that I don't actually have a problem.
You didn't fall into the definition.
Yeah, and I could even, like, I could, when I was cheering in the NFL and on the fitness committee, and I was one of the girls that people would come to if they were struggling with, body image, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, or just needing changes in their diet or exercise or anything, I could look at girls struggling with that and be like, oh, I should help them. I need to help them. Like, I did not associate myself as someone who had an eating disorder. But that's totally denial, and that's totally self-justification, because for 6 years on and off, I was purging.
What did you tell yourself it was?
I knew that it wasn't normal, but I think it wasn't, I was doing it in like a healthier way, and so it wasn't as extreme as an eating disorder to me.
Did you feel like you were trying to stay a certain weight, or what was it that led you to it?
So this has been interesting. I feel like I've had to really dive into this since the eating disorder to really figure this out. I think a lot of times the misconception with eating disorders can be it's just an extreme form of dieting. It can be like, oh, I want to be a certain weight, so I'm going to do this thing that's going to get me there.
Right.
It's so much more than that. And to be honest, like during this time, there were times where I'm swimsuit modeling. There was times where, cheering in the NFL, obviously the outfits are not particularly covering. Right. So it's like I'm in front of people and I'm fairly comfortable with my body. So it wasn't even to get to this certain weight. And to be honest, girls who are bulimic are usually heavier.
Yeah.
Whereas like anorexic obviously are very tiny, and I know this because I study it.
Right.
So it's not even like this is the way to get to a certain weight.
So the goal wasn't skinniness.
Well, I'm sure that was part of a goal in my mind, but not specifically with bulimia. It would be just like, I can't not purge. Like it would get, when those urges would come, it's like a drug addiction. When those urges would come, it's like, I have to do it. I have to get it out. And it would be like, it wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't like consciously we want to be purging in order to be skinny.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't want to purge. I don't want to be that girl. And then all of a sudden it's like, I got to, I have to. And I couldn't fight it on my own.
Was it something that it's like if you just felt too full, like you felt like gross or dirty, like you had to get something gross out of you?
Definitely not like a too full. I think the kind of classic like binging and purging, I wouldn't even say I was necessarily binging. It could be like I had a piece of cake at a birthday party, which is normal, but I was like, that cake is sitting in there. I have to get that cake out.
Yeah.
And so
yes, it's almost like a heightened awareness to, I know what's in the cake.
Yeah.
And I know what it could do to me.
Yeah,
like it's poison.
And I think that there was so much in my life that was not in my control, that was out of control. This was something I could control. I could control if those calories were in my body. I could control, and I wasn't a calorie counter, but I could control this aspect even when other things were out of my control.
And it felt kind of easy because you're like, all you have to do is throw up. And it's sort of like an easy, like, this food doesn't have power over me. Like, no, you're not going to stay there. I can get you out.
Yep.
Wow. When was your first purge?
It's so funny. I can't remember when it became regular, but I can definitely remember the first purge. A girlfriend and I had just decided to get like a late night snack. We went to like a late night junk food place, and it wasn't, like I said, I just ate like a dessert. It wasn't even excessive.
Yeah.
But that time it was kind of what you were saying of like that sweetness was just kind of like, ooh, like making me nauseous, and I just wanted it out. in the sense of like, I think this might make me throw up anyway. And so I'm like, I'm just going to get it out.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it, like, as far as bulimia, it was just like, this is making me sick. But I think it's like the stepping stone, you know?
Wow.
As soon as I had done that once, there was this element of like, oh, I feel so much better. Also, now I don't have those calories. And then like that, just that like processing that ended up snowballing later. But it was actually months before I purged again after that. It really was a one-off and then became a stepping stone.
It sounds like it sort of gave you a sense of power.
Yeah, I think that there is a power aspect, a control aspect. I think it became on my terms.
Yeah, because it's like, the first time you had that dessert, and you were like, ew, this feels gross. And that sounds like a reasonable rationale for throwing up. Oh, you felt like you were going to throw up anyway, so why don't you just go do it? But then you did it, and you're like, oh, I just made myself do that, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Why am I going to let something make me feel gross when it doesn't have to?
Yeah.
And so it's like, that feeling seems like kind of almost like the addiction.
Yeah. Well, I think that there becomes a whole aspect of what you get addicted to. Yes, I think it's the control that you're addicted to. I think there's also just, neurological aspects start to happen with that, and so I think, and there also becomes a tolerance bit too. Like that one time was extreme at first, and then, once every couple of weeks was extreme at first. And then I can remember the last Christmas I was bulimic on Christmas Day. I threw up 3 different times. You're eating not as healthy food, but it's like, I had the moment the 3rd time, I was like, this is Christmas. I'm supposed to be celebrating Jesus. And instead I'm
punishing yourself.
Yeah, I wasn't punishing myself, but it was the first moment of being like, this has escalated, even though it's 6 years in, mind you, but it was the first time I had to take a little bit of a step back. But then I quieted that voice again because I didn't want to look at it yet.
Yeah, you felt like you had a sense of control on the feeling of control.
Yeah.
And then suddenly that started to control you.
Yeah. Oh, it was for sure a vicious cycle.
I relate to this. I couldn't throw up. Like, I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But laxatives.
Yeah.
And I don't really think people talk about laxatives, like bulimia, through laxatives. And that was never in any textbooks.
Right.
So I was definitely like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I did that in college. And I always sat near the door.
Yeah.
And then I could eat what I wanted and be skinny. But then I probably had bulimia through exercise too. So those are my 2 strategies.
Yeah, right.
And because that's not really like a thing, then you're fine.
Yeah.
And also, no one's talking about it. So it's not like you're like, me too, girl.
Right.
Like that's nasty.
Right. Like definitely not something I want to talk about.
Yeah. But I think it's the I don't know if it was like, maybe it was control. I don't think it was power as much for me as much as it was like, ew, I feel gross and I don't want this to just like settle and like go onto my thighs.
Yeah.
So
it's controlling the image too, controlling the way people see us and controlling how we feel about our image as well.
That has a lot to do with it. Like, I didn't realize that being skinny or being thin had a lot to do with my identity. I remember saying to Chris after giving birth, I think to my 2nd son, I was like, I think if I couldn't lose pregnancy weight, I would feel worthless.
Wow.
Like, I don't think I would feel like I had value or identity. Yeah. Which is so crazy for me to like realize that when like I teach on value and identity. But there was a lot of weight in that, and I think it's because of the being a performer, being on stage, and that being a thing. And I mean, I remember through like high school and college and probably my early 20s, watching other people eat and wondering how are they eating that?
Yeah.
With it, and then just going about their day after. Like, how are they eating that and not thinking about it after? Because I would eat something and be like wrecked, you know, or I would be thinking about everything I ate or didn't eat.
Right.
Like, I had so much weight and control, and I don't really know how I got out of that and started eating like normally again, where it didn't have so much control over me anymore. Do you remember what it was for you that kind of launched you out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, so I was actually talking about this recently with a psychologist and talking about like breaking the addiction of eating disorder. And they were talking about, you know, oh, it's so much harder than say a drug addiction or alcoholism because you can't just avoid the substance, right?
Oh,
like you can't quit food cold turkey. You still have to eat.
Can't quit reading those nutrition facts. Yeah.
And so I actually feel really fortunate because I had actually tried several times to stop. I had like, you know, I would maybe go 3 months without because I am disgusted with myself for doing it. And I'm, you know, trying not to, but I always still had the urge to. And eventually I would succumb to the urge. And at this point I hadn't told a soul. I mean, I was in a 3.5-year relationship and he had no idea.
Because you didn't even think it was like worth talking about.
And like, you know, when you're so entrenched in shame and trying to disassociate from it, you're going to keep it in the dark. You're going to do everything you can to keep it in the dark. The irony is, if you were just bring it into the light, God's like going to work in it and heal it, but I'm like keeping it as far in the dark as I can. And in my own strength, I don't know that I could have ever gotten over it, especially not being willing to bring it to a professional. I wouldn't tell doctors. I wouldn't tell, you know, I wasn't in therapy, but I think even if I was, I don't think I would have told them. So nobody knew, so nobody could help me. And on my own, I just couldn't fight the addiction. And
you didn't know it was an addiction at the time, and you don't tell doctors because you think I'm making the choice.
Oh, I think that I was trying. I think the reason I wouldn't even tell a doctor is I think I was ashamed.
Yeah.
And I think that I had self-justified that I didn't actually have a problem, but they wouldn't understand that, is the way that I thought. If I were to say that, they wouldn't get it, and they would think I have a problem.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't realize I'm like doing it the healthy way. I couldn't just talk myself in circles, clearly.
Yeah.
And so I think also if I had spoken it out loud, I would have been ashamed and I would have known I had a problem. And so it just stayed in the dark.
Tell me about the night that you realized God hurts the way you've been hurting yourself.
So I, like I said, never realized I had a problem, never realized this would ever be something God cared about. And someone approached me and said that they had a vision about, they saw a girl, they couldn't see her face, they had no idea it was about me. She had long brown hair, it was covering her face, and she was making herself throw up. And then they described things from her childhood that were contributing to her having this problem and ending up here in this place, and that's how she was dealing with it. And little do they know, they're describing the things from my childhood.
Wow.
They have no idea. They're bringing this to me because of my degree, because this is the field that I work in, because I have, ironically, talked to girls about these kinds of issues.
You've been a mentor in this area, and you're seen as a leader.
Yes, and so they were like, you know, and it was a male too, and he was like, I feel like I can't necessarily address this. You know, I think it's someone in our church. Like, can you see who you think it might be and see if you could talk to them? Meanwhile, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, this is 100% me. But what comes out of my mouth is like, oh, of course, I'll pray about it. I'm still not ready to admit.
You will. You're like, well, I will talk to her.
Her and I will have a conversation. And so I eventually did tell that person that it was about me, but that was the first time of realizing that this hurts God's heart. It was the first time of realizing this is something He cares about.
Yeah.
It was the moment of like, wow.
Like God spoke to someone else about me.
Yeah. Like
to reveal to you, look, I see you in those hidden moments that no one else knows about.
And it makes you wonder, how often have you tried to speak it to me? How often had I not been listening, not been ready to hear it? That He was like, okay, we're going to have to go through someone else, because clearly it needs to be spoken out for you to really be like, wow, this is real.
In such a way that you cannot explain.
Yeah.
Like a person who doesn't know you.
Right.
Okay, so now you know God cares about what you're hurting about, but now you need to get free. You had an experience with God at the lake.
Yeah.
That literally set you free. Tell me about that.
So basically, I spent the next couple weeks praying into this and realizing that this was something God cared about. And there was just this moment that I was sitting out by the lake near my house where I tend to pray, and it was just a Holy Spirit fall moment. Yeah. So it was in Matthew, and there's 3 different verses that God was leading me to, and the first one was the moment where Jesus comes out from his baptism, and he was and God tells, like, this is my beloved son, with him I am well pleased. And it was the first time, like, God was like, through Jesus, that's not just him, that's you. You are my beloved daughter. And like, with you, I am well pleased. And like, was just this moment of this, just this realization of the way that God loves us, and the way that our identity is so supposed to be rooted in him and in his love for us. And just like, I felt like he did give me a kind of, a moment of being able to see and recognize the way that he sees me, and how deeply he wanted me to see myself that way. And I think so much of kind of what you were saying, my identity was rooted in so many external factors, was rooted in, how people saw me, my achievements, my grades, whether or not they found me attractive. Like, that sounds terrible to say, but like, growing up in our culture, that is something that comes to mind for young women.
So you realized that a big part of your identity was rooted in what you looked like.
Yeah, well, I think just external factors in general. So it was so much more than just the image. Yes, that was part of it, but image in all aspects. Like, did people view me as intelligent? Did people view me as successful? Did people view me? And then, yes, like, how did they view me as attractive? Did they, just all the aspects. Basically, I cared way too much what people thought about me.
Right.
And not enough about what God thought about me. And I think having that moment where he was really speaking my identity over me, and it was like, it was like a flow. It was like, as that identity washed over me, it was the chains of bulimia fell down. Like, it was like they couldn't stay on while that identity fell on. And it was like nothing I can describe. It was such a moment of just,
wow, that just moved me, clearly.
And I mean, I literally, I can't even like explain it. It was just like the presence of God was so thick, and just, it was, so there'd been so many times before that I had tried to stop, but I knew it wasn't, as much as I could be so resolute, the telltale time was going to be the next time I had the urge. And in this moment, I knew that wasn't even true. The addiction itself fell off of me in a complete moment of like emotional healing, spiritual healing, physical healing, that I knew I would never even crave to do it again.
That's insane, Chelsea.
And after 6 years, I can't even describe how to even understand that, because I had just got to a place where even if I know I don't want to do it ever again, but then the compulsion hits and I have to.
Yeah.
And I just knew in this moment that is no longer a part of my identity. And God spoke that over me. And as I'm journaling, like, I kid you not, reading the page, you see my handwriting, and then like you see the scribbles of like what God is speaking over me.
Fast enough.
Yeah. And it was just, he just spoke that was no longer a part of me, and that Christ died for us to be free, not for us to be in chains. And through Christ, those chains were broken, and he spoke that freedom over me.
And how he did it in such a private way, like private and intimate.
Yeah, I feel like, he knows what we're able to handle.
Right.
And I think I've had this moment, because I've talked about this with people before, because I think it can be people who have been praying for supernatural healing. Right. It can be an encouragement that it happens, but it can also be, well, why not me? And they can say like, oh, why did you get this healing in an instant when I've been praying for healing and praying for healing?
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
And first off, it definitely wasn't the first time I prayed over it, right? And it was a process getting there. And I think God cares more about our character than our circumstances. And I actually am very grateful he didn't heal it sooner, because the healing, the lack of addiction and the lack of that being a part of me wasn't all he wanted.
I love that you said that about healing and praying for supernatural healing, and how it can feel unfair when someone else gets it and the other person is like, okay, so does God love you more than me? But how he cares about what's being worked out in us and through us more than he cares about deliverance from the circumstances that might actually be refining something in us. I mean, that's helpful. It's hard, especially for anyone who's in it right now. Who's like, okay, but I really just want the deliverance. Like, how much more can I learn?
Right.
So how have you become more of who God created you to be through that journey?
Many ways. I think if I think about the person I am on the other side of this, first of all, even though I had found God before this moment, I really do feel like I was standing on one side of the cross and then I'm standing on the other side. You know what I mean?
Love that visual.
I feel like there was such a change in me. The freedom was instantaneous.
Yeah.
The process wasn't. The process leading up to it and the process after, God has continued to teach me so much through that experience and through the things he has rescued me from. I think the person I am now can walk into more difficult circumstances and still carry a level of joy that I didn't have before, because so much of not only my identity, but also just the way I felt, my joy in external circumstances, my joy about myself, even the way I view God within me, it was so determined by external factors that it could drop, at the drop of a hat, you know what I mean? And I think now I'm so much more rooted that I can go through more difficult circumstances and be more joyful and still be filled with love and filled with light, that I think it really does change how I walk into circumstances now. Ooh. And I like that. I also feel like the way I was so determined to keep everything in the dark and to keep everything hidden, because it just felt like the worst thing if anyone were to see any kind of problem in me, obviously the eating disorder, but just anything that was less than perfect felt very scary for anyone to see. And I think it was really learning first with God, like you can be open and honest in the arms of God. That was something so important for me to learn. But from there, as I step into to be honest, I didn't even really have Christian community at the time, but as I've stepped into Christian community, I've continued to learn that you seek out the people you can be open and honest with too. And I don't think had I not gone through this experience, I don't know that I would have ever found that. I was an expert at hiding. I was an expert at just portraying what I wanted someone to think about me. And so,
is that why you've been afraid to talk about this?
I think so. I think that I think that if it feels a little bit like if you didn't experience it, it's really hard to understand it. And so, but I guess God was just getting me to a point of you're trying to justify it or redeem it, and that's not your job.
Oh.
That's my job. It's redeemed because of what I've done, not because of what you've done. So they don't have to understand it. And
that's good.
Working on it. It's a process. That's what I mean by that wasn't in an instant, right? Those are things that God has had to continue to teach me through that.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom today. Your wisdom from your experience, from your suffering, and just giving us hope that, well, first of all, we're not alone and we can overcome it. And we can present like we've never had a problem before. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
I love you.
I love you.